Hola amigos, muy buenas tardes o noches, tal vez si nos están viendo en otra parte del mundo. Bienvenidos a Conversaciones de Altura. Esta edición la vamos a hacer en inglés porque nuestro invitado, a pesar de que habla varios idiomas, todavía no se casca bien el español, pero bueno, espero les guste. Thank you so much for seeing the show tonight or today, depending on where you're at. It's with great pleasure that I'm going to introduce our next guest, David, also known as Move D, DJ, musician, producer, and overall a very nice, talented person. Thanks. How are you, Dave?
Thank you for having me. I'm very well.
Okay, and before we move on, I want to introduce our co-host. He's flying all the way from Matamoros, from Texas, from the south of the states, just to do the show. And Andres, our also co-host and producer. Thanks again, David. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me again, and it's such a pleasure to be here in this beautiful city and a beautiful weather. I'm coming straight from the winter, and I'm going back there now.
Oh
in a couple
yeah,
of hours.
that's correct, right? Like
Yeah,
Germany now is super cold.
Yeah. Well, thanks to the climate change, it's not super cold, but it's very gray and rainy.
Right.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this: when you book a travel or a trip like this, do you stay longer than you should? You know, just to enjoy the city, or?
It's a bit of a problem because I have a family. I have 2 kids.
Oh,
And
okay.
so either I bring them or I get homesick, and I got lots of work to do at home. So I'm actually here in Mexico only for 2 nights, and which is insane, and it's also very bad for my climate, eco footprint, whatever. But I'm glad I took the offer and I came to Bahidorá festival, which was like super amazing and a great lineup and super sweet people.
Oh, cool.
And yeah.
So pretty much you came from the festival, right?
Yeah.
Your set was at what, like 6 in the morning or
Yeah,
something
6
yesterday?
to 8, yeah.
Are you used to play at that time?
Well, not particularly. I mean, I'm getting older now, so sometimes I enjoy like playing early evening or even daytime sets. It gives you other options, what music to play as well. But when I heard that I have the option to play after Joe Placel, and it's gonna be the morning, and because of the jet lag, for me it doesn't matter. Is it 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. I'm tired anyway.
Yeah, because the jet.
I thought it's a good idea, and it really worked out so well. Like 1 hour into my set, the sun came up,
Oh,
and before it was a bit cold, and the records felt a bit damp, everything, and then the sun comes out, and in 10 minutes the whole vibe is like.
Oh wow,
It's
interesting.
nice and warm, and you see all the smiling faces. Before you only see disco lights and no faces, and then it gets a lot more personal.
No, for sure.
So it was a really sweet ending to that night.
Did you stay up all night before your set, or did you sleep and then you woke up and like, okay, I'm gonna
I
play?
arrived after 21 hours of travel, so when I got to the location, I crashed out for 3 hours, and then I pretty much went to play my set.
Oh, cool, just like a
Yeah, so I missed.
power nap. or
I
something.
only got 1 hour of Joe Clausel's set, and that was the only music. But from my room, I could overhear like really nice music coming from the stages, live music especially.
Oh, cool.
I think the lineup was really special.
Oh, that's cool. And how about Mexico City? Is it all that you expected? Because
No,
it's
it's
both
different.
your first time,
It's
right?
my first time in Mexico City, and I have to say, at one point it was the biggest city of the world, right? And I think when I was going to school, they were telling us that the city is growing so fast that they also have to extend like the canalization to
Right.
lead all the dump further out. And they were saying if this gets blocked ever for some accident, the whole city will drown
Right.
shit in like a couple of hours. I don't know if that's true.
No,
or
I don't
not.
think that's true. Do you think that's true?
I think it could be true in many cities.
Right.
I don't know. But like I was expecting something like super crazy, like Naples, Italy, where it's only like honking cars and terrible traffic. And this part, Roma,
Yeah.
La Roma,
is so
It's pretty beautiful.
beautiful
yeah.
and quiet. And I feel really home here. It's beautiful.
It's a nice area. Mexico
It's very
City.
European as well,
Right.
in a way.
Right.
Sorry.
No,
No,
go ahead.
if you want to use the mic, just
Sure.
feel
Thanks.
free.
Thanks.
So, what about
Sí se escucha también, sí.
okay. Do you plan, or let me ask you this, how do you plan your trips? Do you try to do like a whole tour? Would you like to do maybe like a whole Mexican tour or like Latin American tour?
I've done a Latin American tour 2 years ago. I came to Tulum and then Colombia and Chile and Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay. So I'd like to do this again, but again, the problem is then I'll be away for 3 weeks and I'll be missing the family.
Right.
So I
yes.
think ideally it's something like 2 weekends and 1 week in between. So I'm away from home for like 10 days total. That's just like the max. If it gets longer than this, I really suffer.
Right.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that Andres came is because he knows pretty well about all your work and all your I don't know, like basically your work life.
Yeah.
And I think we were discussing previously to this podcast, like what should we talk about and stuff, and like we were really, I don't know, like really excited about you coming to Mexico and to this podcast and stuff, because we really admire your work, and as you were saying before starting, that you rather be known as a musician or as a producer more than a DJ, you know?
Yeah.
And we had like this I don't know, this conversation that we would love to know some of the technical aspects about your producing and your, I don't know, your how to say it?
Your creative process.
Exactly, your creative
You
process
know,
and stuff. And
the way that your workflow maybe happens. And I would like to go back though, because we were discussing right before we started your workshop records, right? And I was gonna ask, what is your relationship to that label?
The label, there's a lot of myths about it, but like it belongs to Low-Tech.
Okay.
And he is one of my oldest friends in the music scene. In the very early days of my label, Source Records, we
yes.
were getting demos from a collective, and they call themselves System 360. And it was a compilation of tracks, and they were quite varied in style, but we loved a lot of tunes. And it came with a letter saying we're a group of 6 people living in a shared kind of farmhouse and with a studio, and we don't work on these tracks together, but we didn't say this is by this guy, so it's all on the same tape and branded as System 360, and it was Low-Tech, Marvin Desh, and some other guys. I know their names but not their artist names, but Low-Tech and Marvin Desh are the most noticeable names. Cool. Yeah. And it was quite special as well, their approach, because they're located in the former East Germany, which was a communist country.
Right.
And it was just after the reunification, and for the majority of Eastern German people, their reaction was totally anti-socialism, communism. And but what they did, like, is say we work in a collective and we live in a commune and we don't put names to our tracks, was a very kind of communist approach, and very atypical, like a commune, and very atypical for like how everybody else was behaving at that period. So that caught my attention as well, and I realized these people must be different and interesting, and they really are.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So people would just like pitch ideas or create music there, and it's like, okay, whoever wants to use it can use it, or
no, it wasn't public domain, but they didn't say this track was done by Marvin Dash or that track was by Low-Tech, but they sent a a pile of tracks saying that's all from us, and we're 6 people.
Right.
And they eventually formed what is now Workshop.
Sort of. I mean, they took different routes. There was a girl involved as well. Jana, she was more like a DJing happening in the 90s, and some guys retired, and also like if I don't know if you heard of Rand Music, which is one of the biggest, probably the biggest pressing plant for vinyl now in Germany.
Wow.
It's the same group of people coming out of this early commune. So with some Workshop is a child of this, as well as Rand Music. So their impact was really kind of big.
Important, very.
Yes.
Wow. That's
and
cool.
well, and also we were talking about your collaborations with different record labels and stuff, and
I would like to before we move into more specific collaborations, just talk about Source for a little bit.
Actually, I was going to there because we were talking about that Source is not running anymore.
No, but it's not officially dead. I still own it, and I'm thinking about doing stuff, but then I would more do it like for my own music and not as a label with
like big business.
It's
kind
too
of
much work involved. I can't go back there dealing with artists and serious distribution and all the business aspects. I could only do it like KDJ Records or something out of the pocket, 500.
Yeah.
And something like that, and then my own music only. But back then it was different, and there was never a real plan to do a label. I was always playing music and involved in bands, but at the same time I started DJing in 1987. That was before I even heard about techno.
Okay.
And so I was playing funk and black music mainly, and hip hop. And then this friend of mine, who was actually the founding member with me for Source Records, he was the first in the area to start throwing acid house parties.
Nice.
Around 88, 89.
Wow.
And it was a real culture shock. And in the beginning, like with my background of funk music, I didn't feel that music was particularly funky. So, but the vibe the scene created, that was so attractive. People were just nice, you know, and they took me on as an outsider, because in the early days of techno it was a lot about like disguise, like you go as something.
Oh wow, like
and you
as a
put
character?
stupid like a garbage man or a diver or some kind of costume in a way. And I was always a very straight guy, and I didn't do the fancy thing, but they kind of didn't, they included me still. I remember one key incident. I was at a party at the famous Milk Club in Mannheim where they played hard break beats, and it was really intense, and I was just sitting there being overwhelmed by the music and the volume. It was really loud as well, and then this crazy rave kid comes to me and like, hey, what's up with you? You look kind of pale. Did you have a bad pill? Are you not well? And I said, no, I'm fine. But like, that somebody who's a wild stranger comes to me and asks me if I'm fine.
Right.
Was such a nice gesture, you know.
Right.
Like the upbringing I've had with rock music and festivals, people would trample on each other.
Oh, the
and it was,
moshing.
you know, there's alcohol and you want trouble and this kind of attitude, and then somebody, are you not well? It was so beautiful that this is what kind of turned me on to rave.
Oh wow, that's so interesting.
The
to
love
see.
atmosphere.
Yeah, the love atmosphere.
Very
and
cool.
then I grew to like the music as well, getting sentimental even. It's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, but yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, that was good times.
That's
No,
awesome, man.
it must be really interesting to think about those days, right? When everything was more organic.
And so homemade, you know, it wasn't a commercial thing. It was a total underground phenomena, and it coincided with the coming down of the Berlin Wall and East Berlin, a vast area of like where abandoned factories. You could just go in there with a power generator and a sound system and do it, because the police were not working. They weren't getting paid anymore.
Right.
And it was a kind of a void zone where you were free to experiment, and people were putting on these parties, and I remember that I don't think there was a set entrance fee even. It was more like donation, kind of whatever you have you give, or you offer to help with the decoration, or you do the wardrobe for an hour, this kind of
help with certain things.
Bring some fruit and give it out to people, kind of. Yeah, it was really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it only took like 2-3 years, and all the big Marlboro stepped in with the sponsored big events, and then ticket prices all of a sudden like $50 or something crazy.
Oh shit.
And it kind of killed the vibe of that first wave, which felt like the 60s, summer of love, whatever, revolution kind of thing. And in Berlin at the same time there was a lot of squatting going on in the east. In Friedrichshain, whole streets or blocks would be squats, and they had a whole kind of working system infrastructure. Like somebody could repair cars, someone else would do haircuts, someone was printing posters. So within their community, they were able to do almost all things you need in life, but you didn't need money because you did this, the other one did that for you, and it was all like this give and take.
Wow.
And so I was really kind of fantasizing and idealizing about like a real deeper impact, and it kind of all vanished, but at least I was a witness of those days, and I think they be legendary, like the 60s are legendary now,
And have you felt any, I don't know, any festival or any party or any gig recently that vibe, like that vibe that could go close to that?
Yeah, I mean, especially talking about festivals, there are some that are very kind of low budget, and artists agree to play for a fee close to nothing, really. Mm-hmm. And yet, like most people would kill to play there. Even like free rotation would be a good example.
Right.
And that definitely has a strong hippie vibe. And I think especially in the festival culture, there's a lot of reminiscence of like what was happening, because it was all about traveling sound systems as well, especially from the UK. And then when they were suffering from repercussions there and the Civil Rights Act or whatever it was called, when they weren't allowed to have like raves, people weren't allowed to gather anymore, they started packing up their sound systems in vans and drove to Holland and down to Croatia and Serbia and whatnot, tribal gathering. And this kind of hippie vibe, I think, parallel to the big mainstream, somehow carried through, and it's probably the same old people. A lot of them are like my age or even a bit older, so old hippies essentially.
I've heard free rotation is very like utopic kind of festival where it's very much like
kind of like Burning Man in a way. Or
it's not as extreme, and it's so small. It's not so small because they want to be hip and elite and exclusive.
That's all the capacity.
It's the capacity of the venue, and it's the venue. They stand there and they really count every single person, and they say not a single person more than our allowance because of police
sustainability and everything.
Yes, so it's forced to be small, but it also, like, I think any normal festival promoter would realize I could sell 3 times or 5 times or 10 times as many tickets. I move on to a new location and I make big money, but they stay there and they think I don't want money. I think 500 people is just how much you can digest to really become a group. And you go there for the 3 days and you really feel like you know every single face in there. And a friend of mine, she lost her brand new phone there like 5 times, and it was always at the reception. Never people would steal it, but always turn
That's
it
awesome.
back. That's the vibe, It's really cool.
Friendly, and it's like a family vibe.
It's like a family.
And it's interesting that you said that up to like 500 people.
Yeah.
It's how much?
It's 550 tickets plus all the people working on the production and the artists. So I think the capacity limit of the venue is something between 7 and 770, whatever. So it's 500 tickets for
the public.
Yeah, like the way communes were run back in the day. Like in your commune, there were up to 200 people, and if more people were included in that commune, things would start to be all chaotic. You know, I mean, we're supposed to be living like a commune of 200 to 300 people.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that nowadays, well, it's still like in the 80s and even in 2020, we still want to do that, right? Like,
yeah.
Actually, I mean, regarding that, I mean, I know that it doesn't have anything to do with this, but I was looking at a documentary the other day about this community here in Puebla, that it was supposed to be like a very poor community, and now after like some program that they implanted there, now that everybody is like living well, they're having their houses, they're having good food because they learn how to cultivate and how to help each other with their, I mean, if they need to build a house, all the community goes and helps and build a house, and like all these sustainable ideas that is not like I don't know, that it's not like a tendency, it's just what they need to survive, and they're
and it seems very kind of logical and natural to do it like this. And I think I'm not a communist, but there's a lot in what Marx says which is damn true. And I think a main aspect is like we make money working on something that we are totally disconnected from.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with ourselves, and we don't really own a share of it, and it only gives us money to buy something like housing, which is a very essential thing for yourself. And you should, I mean, ideally you grow your fruit or you do your arts and you build your house and you find people to help you, but nothing ever works like this. We always have to talk to strangers that only want money, you know?
Right. No, yeah, and it was pretty interesting. I was talking to my girlfriend and I was saying that they're fucking, I mean, it feels like something pretty primitive, but nowadays it looks like something like really from the future and like from really far away,
sustainable,
like,
healthy.
And it's pretty bad that we have to live in that.
And I think it creates a whole different community. Like in Europe, people don't know their neighbors, and probably in the States for the most part it's the same. And I think if you like live in a community where neighbors actually help each other, and that's something about the eastern part of Germany. In the communist system, everything was built on like, I need this, I know someone, he has it, he can help you, and things, they were working like this, and I think it's very healthy, and it makes for a community where people actually know their neighbors, and there's a lot more understanding and a feeling of like unity or whatever.
Right.
But maybe it's not in the interest of the people ruling us that we get so close, you know. They rather when you go to your work, you go home,
there needs to be
watch the TV. You don't need to talk to your neighbor.
Right.
You need to be exploited somehow.
Do you think that that whole idea still lives in Germany or in some parts of Germany, or you feel that it's all like changed and everything's about capitalism and stuff like that?
I think 95% is about capitalism, for sure. Yeah. I mean, in bigger cities you find underground scenes and networks.
Right.
But like in a small town like Heidelberg, I mean, I'm surprised every now and then even we got something interesting like an autonomous kind of cultural center where some stuff is happening, and that's also very anti-commercial. But it's compared to the 90s, where this felt like it's really making an impact on society as a whole. Now it's shrunk back to a little percentage. And I would guess that in a country like Mexico, there are still stronger roots, and the people, the value of a family, I think, in more Catholic or more Southern European countries even is stronger. There's a more of a feeling of like of being a community, whereas in Central Europe, or if you go further north, it feels like the colder it gets, people are more, even South America. Like I love Chile, but everyone was saying in South America, Chile is not really South America. We call it the Switzerland of South America. And then Chilean people were explaining to me, yes, we are different, and they said probably it has to do with like they have a cold winter. So in the winter we need an apartment, we need heating, so we need money, we need a job, we need to work. If I was in Brazil, I could live at the beach and eat coconuts and fruit that I find, and I don't really have to work.
And you have to go out and you have to be outside and like...
Yeah, and so I think it's like the pressure to kind of make your everyday life and pay your bills will automatically push you somewhere else, and the more you kind of relate it with nature, the more natural is that these old kind of healthy structures still exist, you know.
Right.
Like villages, as opposed to mega cities where nobody knows anymore.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting how, like Andres said, like we're trying to go back to how we started, right? To be more, or at least I think my group of friends, we're trying to be more like that, more like a commune. Like, okay, he does this and he does that, and then we exchange skills or things, right?
So natural.
Do you feel that the scene, the electronic scene, has, because supposedly electronic scene came from the underground, from like this kind of commune idea of sharing and collaborating and stuff. And do you think now, like in the 2020s, the scene has gone all about money and capitalism and all about...
Arguably, or whatever is reflected by the media, which is always kind of run by money or ads and clicks and numbers. So if you're approaching the scene, the first things you will hear about is all like Tiesto and whatever, Swedish house mafia. Only if you dig really deep, you'll find the other stuff which is still there. And I think it's nice to be nostalgic about the 90s, but when we started the label, we felt that electronic music was still pretty limited. There was only like a couple of styles, and there wasn't such a wide scope of interesting different styles of electronic music as they are right now.
Today, yeah.
And I don't think there's ever been better times to go digging for great music. And but at the same time, it's such an underground phenomena, and I said for years that I think there's more producers than actually people, consumers, going to record shops.
Yeah, I have thought that before, like a lot of times.
Going back
before I only guessed this, but now I think it's a fact. You know, like everybody gets these apps on their phones or tablets that invite you to make music, and it's hard to draw a line at what point are you starting to become a producer. But everybody will start playing with it, and I think that's fine, but it takes a lot of determination to find good music, and I'm kind of overwhelmed by it. So my reaction is a lot like looking for music in general, but not for electronic music particularly. Also because whatever music I listen to will kind of reflect in the music I produce, and I would hate to sound like something which is just like contemporary electronic music, and I'm sounding like copying whatever Mad Mike or someone. It's terrible. I rather try to get my kind of inspiration from who knows what Johnny Guitar Watson and bring that into electronic music.
Right.
And then I'm listening professionally, I'm listening to so much electronic music, and a lot of it is not really
that up to
it's not my perfect music, so I'm kind of oversaturated with it, and so at home I really listen to other things
besides that.
And how do you get your inspiration now after all these years of producing and playing and listening to music and stuff? Like, how do you get this new inspiration to produce or to compose something?
There's so many factors that play together. One sad fact is, I believe that it is, if you have the blues, it's such an old story, but if you suffer, you can also kind of manifest it in beautiful, sincere, deep art. And I think a lot of like great artists, struggle was part of their life, but was also the essential force behind their great creative output, because they had to cope with some whatever drawbacks. And the more happy you are, the less inspiring or the less the urge to really create. But that's one aspect. Like, I get inspired by sounds as well, like a certain machine that I play with, or an instrument. Like, I would say the guitar is still my main instrument as to compose music, or an acoustic piano, and they just take you somewhere. I mean, it's hard to explain, but like so the motivation or the inspiration comes from the inside, from the soul, from your emotions, but it also comes from stuff you hear, and it makes you curious. You want to explore more about it, and oops, you're in the middle of making a track you didn't even think about it. You know?
So I'm assuming a lot of improvisation goes into your methods, and
absolutely, improvisation is the key. And if not, especially if you don't work with other people, and the phenomena of techno, where you can produce full self-sufficiently, is kind of unnatural for the way music has been created.
Normally it's with a team,
It's with a team. I mean, not if we're talking about classical music. Then it's down to composers. They had a great vision, but as soon as you bring in an orchestra, already it's about people sounding together and vibing together. But everything since jazz is music, or music as its purest form is probably the oldest way of communication. Before there was language, I'm sure there was chanting,
of course,
and humming and drumming, and and
for sure,
jam sessions.
Yes, and so this is where we come from, and this is what music is about. And I think if you're only with your computer or whatever, and it's only you and your mind, it's not the way it should be. And if it's all conceptual, the logical result would be that you keep making the same track, and in a way you do, because you refine whatever your aesthetics, what you think makes a good track, you want to make it and make it better, but it's probably it's always kind of the same track.
There's
you're
always
aiming
something
for.
to add or
That too, but I think if you're open enough for accidents and moments that don't align with your concept, that will take you somewhere new. And that's why I believe that collaborations are so essential, because
gives you the freedom to grow the ideas.
And there's feedback, and there's someone, and he does something that you wouldn't have thought of at all, and maybe you love it, maybe you don't love it, but you can't say I don't really like this, so you gotta kind of let's work with it, and in the end it's something interesting, and it's something real, and you can tell. And I can go back listening to collaborations, and I remember the situation with the other people involved, and sometimes I do with the stuff that I did on my own, but a lot of the time it wasn't such a special moment as it is when you with someone else.
Right. So was there a time in your career that you were looking or were going after perfection in your music? Because you said that you have to be open to like mistakes and stuff like that. But sometimes I play guitar, so sometimes when I'm writing a song, sometimes I catch myself looking for perfection, but then there's no perfection, right? Did that ever happen to you in your career?
I don't know. I mean, my nature is very kind of penile almost. Like I like to make stuff nice, and I have a high risk of like when I'm on my own to overwork it and over polish it and look too much for perfection. But essentially, I am for perfection. But how you kind of describe it, or what is perfection to you? It's not even like I think like my basic musical preferences have remained the same. I was born to be the truth is that when you're young, you're trying to show off what you can do, and that's I think how I made my music have another element, has something really smart and stuff. When you get older, you try to show what you can leave out and strip it down to the essence. So I kind of think if my aesthetics have changed, I have a tendency to go for the more purer stuff, and I'm also like really amazed by music that's very pure in a way, and simplicity in general. I think like a really sophisticated pencil drawing where someone with like 3 lines kind of lays out like a perspective or some motive. I'm so amazed, more than like the most elaborate Rembrandt or whatever, and look at the lights and the colors. Yeah, that's great, but that's what I can do already, like aim for perfectionism.
Right.
But the genius aspect,
Is
like
the
to
reduction.
capture something, with 3 lines, that's my biggest respect. So I always respected not the Quincy Jones, I respected the homemade people who made with no kind of budget the greatest results.
Yeah.
So.
Have you discovered or recently heard something that really fills you, like really completes like that idea of feeling you good about listening to something, like recently, like something new? I mean, it doesn't have to be new, like currently new, but like could be new for you, you know?
Let's see. Yeah, it's constantly, I mean, on many levels. Like the last moment in a concert situation was when I saw Krangbin. Have you heard of them?
No.
It's a trio. They describe themselves as Thai funk.
Okay.
And the trio is a drummer, a black guy, hip-hop drummer, very reduced, restrict kind of style, no gimmicks.
Oh, okay.
But really groovy. A great, awesome guitarist wearing a funny, ridiculous wig. And the most amazing girl on bass. And she
What's
plays
the band, sorry?
Krangbin.
Oh, yeah,
and
I know
it
them.
means
Yeah,
airplane in Thai.
See, look,
Where are they from?
the States.
No, they're UK.
Oh, the UK?
UK.
Yeah, okay.
And
They were just here recently.
yeah, no, they're blowing up. And I saw them at a festival. No one heard about them. So when they started playing, there were 5 people,
And
then in 45 minutes, the place was exploding. But this woman she's from another planet.
Yeah,
I mean, the way she
awesome.
sways with her bass, and she plays like Bootsy Collins or some really good funk bassist. But it seems like easy to her.
Yeah.
And she's really cute, and the way she kind of moves, they are amazing.
Yeah, they
so
were
that was
here.
something that totally blew my mind. But usually at home I like quiet listening stuff, and it could be Brian Eno, but there's so much to discover. What he's done through the decades, and so much music that people were referring us to, even Can and stuff that I knew as a name, but I didn't really ever listen to Krautrock because being German, Krautrock was pretty uncool, you know.
Oh, I see.
It was cheesy to you.
Yeah, it was. It seemed like when I came to Texas, I realized that it really meant the world for
super
some
cool,
American people.
Yeah.
And like the last time I came to New York, they were listening to the whole Grauzone Eisbär album, and they were totally like absorbing it. And I've heard that one song and I liked it, but I never really knew about the whole deeper dimension.
Yeah.
So there's so much music to
Going
discover.
for sure.
Right.
I wanted to expand a little bit on what you were saying earlier, in terms of simplicity within art, and specifically related to some of these earlier ambient works of yours and collaborations. Could you maybe tell us a bit about how those projects came about, and what was the methodology like, or the mindset in order to work that kind of...
Yeah, I mean, the whole history of how the label was initiated is interesting. We briefly spoke about my friend putting on these parties, but he left to live in San Francisco and said the label idea which we had didn't seem really appealing to him anymore. But I was making another friend at my best friend's place, an Irish guy, a bit older than me, and he had a Mexican restaurant in Heidelberg. But more than the restaurant was like a bit like, it was a live music menu, and they sold tacos and tostadas.
Nice.
And behind the bar was a guy, I knew him from school, but he was like 3 grades under mine, so it's not the kind of people you want to hang out with at high school. But then when he started working there, and he was playing the most awesome music as a bartender, John Lurie, whatever, all kinds of interesting music going everywhere. And then I was just, through my rave friend, exposed to techno, but he also showed me careless space and chill out and more kind of listening stuff,
Right.
and like
spacey kind of...
and then with this guy working behind the bar in the Mexican Irish owned restaurant, I started having this debate: is techno worthwhile, or is it even music or not? And he was kind of this attitude, techno, no. And I said, yes, check this out. And then when he heard the KLF especially, and all the referencing to kind of classic music, he thought of his favorite samples that he then brought to me, and we were doing our first album, The Earth to Infinity.
Okay.
And it was just our goal of like kind of
So Deep Space
inspired.
Network, right?
Yes.
Deep Space
And
Network.
we didn't even have a name for the first one, which is called Earth to Infinity.
Okay.
But that's the first Deep Space
Okay.
Network, but not officially at Discogs. It's a different.
Okay.
And so with this, and Yes, we saw ourselves a little bit in the context of KLF, but even KLF at the time was very underground, and it was hard to come by the record, and it wasn't like happening like the Orbital or something that was big at the time.
Yeah.
And so that was already niche, so we weren't expecting anything, and especially we didn't feel like going to talk to a record company A&Rs and this kind of lame shit and then being turned down. So we said if we want to do it, we just have to do it ourselves, and that was very much the spirit of the time. And we just wanted to do this as a one-off, but like the response we got was just like crazy.
Wow.
And we pressed 1,000 CDs and they were gone in one day.
Oh, shit.
And we got all this press from the UK because there was such a vacuum. There was this Frankfurt kind of techno, there was some Rotterdam Gabba, there was the good old Detroit that all initiated all, and that was pretty much it.
Wow.
There was to choose from. Even the Berlin techno was just like beginning to happen.
Okay.
And there was no listening music and no albums except for the Orb, the KLF albums, and compilations of early Derek May and Carl Craig stuff on Belgium label Bus.
Wow.
They made really nice compilations, and these were kind of albums. They worked with like listening tunes, like the early kind of Psyche and BFC and whatever, those projects by Carl Craig when he was really the god of techno.
Yeah.
And there was nothing else, so it was easy. If you had an album which was halfway decent, it would end up in a shelf of pretty much every record store.
Oh, cool.
And then it was gone. Nowadays, to even get into the shop
It's
is
pretty
hard.
tough.
Yeah.
So it was a different time. We were lucky to be there at the right time. Fax was also starting around then, and for him, he really milked it because there was such a demand for listening techno after the club that like for a while he was selling them like crazy. And that was the 90s, and I was living, DJing was just a hobby. In the beginning 80s, starting 87, it was my student kind of job, so I was paying my rent like this, playing 3 times a week in the same kind of disco, high street, mainstream disco. And so it was that the old kind of DJ, typical, and the superstar DJ didn't even exist. There was Sven Fed, but he was becoming popular not as a DJ, but with his early electronic productions, Electrica, Salsa, and this kind of stuff. So being a producer and then being a glamorous, flamboyant DJ playing his stuff, he was the first German superstar DJ and probably worldwide.
Yeah.
A real role model after the generation of like Mancusi's and
For sure.
Larry Levans. I'm talking techno now. He was.
How would you actually define the
So
term
when I was a
techno?
DJ, I didn't look at it as a like the kids do now. I want to be a DJ. It's like
Right.
saying
No,
I
it's the
want to
cool
be
thing.
Ronaldo. You know, I
Yeah.
want to be rich and
Yeah.
have these yards and all these chicks. It was nothing about
It wasn't
this
like
when I was a DJ.
Right,
And in the 90s, it was just like fun, and making music was my main income. And then with Napster, the CD burner, and the internet, and the file sharing, pretty much overnight it was over.
Damn, man,
It
that's
was
crazy.
just over, and all the distributors went bankrupt, and they were owing us money, but we owed money to ASCAP or GEMA,
Yeah.
bills they hadn't paid, and so it was terrible. And
That's like
for the whole industry, and
which-
since the
which
year
year?
2000, everybody has to make their money playing gigs, and to an extent that even includes fucking Madonna, because her files are being shared and she's making her money
Right.
like being a model for Gucci or whatever, but not the
Not from the
record
musician.
sales.
No,
Yeah,
well-
and if you're not Madonna, you can forget it, and so you have to go out and perform. So I don't know, I'm 53 now, I can do this a few years more, but like I really wonder what will happen when I can't travel anymore. I'll be fucked. I have no pension, and yeah, it's scary.
Now let me add. Oh.
I wanted just briefly, because
Yeah,
we've said the term quite a bit. I wanted to get your definition of techno. You know,
Yeah, I mean, like for me, it's all techno. I even include the big hit, the Australian girl, not Madonna, Kylie Minogue.
Kylie Minogue is too.
With the house bass line, that
disco samples and stuff.
Yeah. For me, it's techno or music, Madonna, whatever. But so I don't like definitely drum and bass or Detroit techno.
Okay.
It's all.
How would you
techno.
differentiate the line between techno and ambient, though? You know what I mean?
Even ambient is techno
Okay.
if it's contemporary ambient.
Actually, yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Only the old ambient can't be techno because techno wasn't there. So the old ambient is kraut or whatever, or electronic music,
Right.
which is the even bigger term than techno,
Right.
which I prefer over techno. But I kind of like techno. It's
Okay.
But I think it's more like it's like punk. It's almost.
Okay.
It expresses a kind of a movement
Yeah, an
or
ethos.
an attitude.
Yeah,
and-
ethos. Yeah.
Yes, and that could be the same between Solomon and myself.
There you go.
So it's really cool that you said the
He's a
word
cool
punk
guy.
because I was gonna ask you, going back to your story, were you attending other type of shows besides electronic music? Were you going to like see how the punk rock scene was growing, or?
I mean, I was like big into concerts from early days, and I was happy. My parents, my mother especially, she took me to see Elton John, like solo piano tour with Ray Cooper in the second half, just doing like all sorts of percussions. It was great. I was 10 years old, maybe. The single man tour. I mean, I will never forget my whole life. And she also took me. That was maybe 1 week after Lou Reed. That was interesting.
Oh, wow.
I dig in more now. When I was 10 years old, it was a bit too edgy for me.
Right.
And
It's like, what? It's
his
going
whole
for me,
appearance,
for it's
he
too
seems a
edgy.
bit bitter or cynical, and it didn't vibe with me as
Yeah.
a child. But Elton was fine with his funny window wiper on his
Flamboyant.
and he's just so musical.
Genius.
So I love music. I always followed it, but in the 80s particularly, it was all like I was listening to, growing up on the Beatles, then all kinds of rock, Led Zeppelin, what all kids were listening to in the 70s. And then when I heard the Message, Grandmaster Flash, that was it. For a while, guitar music, even though I'm a guitarist, was secondary. It was all about
wow.
drum machines and
Drum machines and
cool hip hop,
Yeah.
and how underground and how rebelliant it was in a cool way. And so I was totally soaked up in that. And like Depeche Mode compared to Grandmaster Flash was like some white guys that appealed to girls, and they were singing, and they had catchy melodies, but it didn't. And all the other like New Romantics, Human League, whatever, they were trying to be soulful, but they weren't really, and
Too
the
sad,
rhythms
right?
were stiff and whatever. I mean, all this music, if I listen to it now, I value it a lot higher, and I think this is like the link between disco and techno is when those guys made pop music using techno gear,
Right.
and it's really important. But back then it didn't touch me, it didn't affect me, and I was really into the A Tribe Called Quest was so much more like, I always loved jazz and their references to jazz.
Yes.
So I was all into black music until people like Larry Heard and Carl Craig and the early Mark Kinchin, MK Capella,
Wow.
and I started to discover good music, and of course
Would you call that?
You can't. I mean, that was a day when I brought home this record, and the selected ambient works one, and talking about simplicity and what to achieve. Ambient Works 2 in my book is one of the really seminal albums.
Wow.
It's so good that Richard kind of gave up music after it, and I understand why.
Wow.
I mean, he's doing some now, but
it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's kind of half-hearted, and he said to me, I lost interest in music. I want to make films, and
No shit.
which he did, like with this David Cunningham,
That's
like heavy
incredible.
into music movie and video stuff, and
he does some installation things too.
The swinging piano.
Yeah.
I think everything he does is great, but like he's totally done it, and there's nothing to prove for him, which I think is almost bad, because like it's good if you feel like you got something.
You accomplished the maximum, the
but
apex.
No, that's not good, I think, because then you're done,
You have nothing else.
And I think that's something that keeps me going. I got stuff that I'm really proud of, like the first conjoined album or whatever. They're approximations to what I think in my book is like interesting, good music.
Yeah.
But it could even be better.
Right.
And I want to go on, but like
gotta leave room.
After Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, it would be hard. It would be hard.
You're right. Yeah, that's like how would you say?
I mean, it's mind bending. It's really.
It's a great album. It is
great.
No, but yeah. So I'm just curious, when bands like KMFDM were mixing like distorted guitars and techno, were you into that?
Yeah, no. No, the KLF. I mean, to this day, I can't compute how they come up with this horrible.
You don't like KMFDM?
I mean, people love it.
It
was a commercial success.
It was a commercial success. I love the manual. Have you all read it?
Yeah.
Their book about how to make a #1 hit. It's fucking crazy, and they did it, and they achieved it. It got
using that method.
It got my biggest respect, and like all the stunts they did, like burning £1 million and all this. I love it. But the ancient Waba of Mumu, it was never for me. And it was hard for me to accept that it's the same people doing Space and Chill Out and that crappy stuff
So you
at
were
the same time. So that one I didn't like. But like I mentioned Orbital before, I wasn't like heavily into them, but that was popular music that I thought, it's catchy, it's techno,
Spacey.
It's got UK, whatever, they're nice guys as well. And so I wasn't against like successful techno, and it's so often the perspective. Like one key tune was S Express when the whole thing started off, and it was a perfect example for me for how a track is not really funky, and now I think it's that funky, and I play it every now and then, and it was called da 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 da. Fucking magnificent.
So no,
great.
No Ministry, no 9 Inch Nails for you.
No.
Oh wow.
No Meat Beat Manifesto. No Moby. I met
no heavy guitars at all.
No punk. Do you like punk or?
Some punk, but not really. I'm a softie. I like.
No, that's cool. I mean, but I think it would be awesome for me if I can travel and
like Kate Bush, like the Awakening. What is that the name? The one before Running Up the Hill. It's
sure.
less known. I think it's called something like that, which would be perfect for what it is, because it's like Laurie Anderson, experimental women in electronic music.
Yeah.
Like she's right at the core of it. There's no FX Twin without Kate Bush, for instance, and she's like a top reference, and that's awkward, weird music. It's not easy listening, but it was never about like a punk attitude. I liked it, but I liked it as a statement, and I like the energy maybe, and if you hear it live, it's cool, but it's not what I really what touches me at home.
Right. What about someone like Peter Gabriel? Are you into his music?
Yeah.
Because his latest album, he uses a lot of electronic beats.
I mean, I'm not like following closely. I don't know about his latest album, but I think his first album after Genesis, and even Genesis, people hate it. It's totally uncool to like prog rock. I loved it. I smoked my first joint listening to The Lamp Lies Down from Broadway, and my English wasn't good enough, and the lyrics are kind of really far out, fairy tale kind of shit, so I was making up my own kind of lyrics, spacing out to this music, and I think this music is problematic, like a lot of disco music as well. It's too many parts. they're trying
Too
to
busy.
show
Too
too
busy.
much, and sometimes they just should have left it simpler.
Mhm.
But as some songs with Peter Gabriel of the very early, probably my favorite Genesis would be the
Right.
first live album, and it's amazing how skilled they were. And Phil Collins is one of the best drummers
Yeah.
ever, and so much talent in this group. It's amazing. So yeah, I listen to almost everything,
Nice.
and them especially. Tried some Yes the other day because YouTube, when they realized I'm okay with prog rock, they
Yeah,
gave me
it's
some
not so
Yes.
bad.
Jazz is
Yeah,
awesome.
not so
yeah,
bad.
but
First
it
albums.
wasn't really. It was hard for me. Sometimes
It can be hard, yeah, I know.
Sometimes it's a voice that doesn't sit right with you, and I know people don't love Peter Gabriel necessarily, but I do. I also love Mark Hollis, the late Talk. Most people don't like him, but to me he sounds like Miles Davis horn. In every note I can hear the struggle. The failure is always part of the deal, and sometimes
Right.
the horn makes like two notes at the same time. It's something
It's just
only
painful.
he can do. Yeah, but beautiful.
Yeah, of course,
Like,
of
how
course.
fragile it is, and
Yeah.
I love when you can feel this. So another big hero of mine is George Gilberto. His singing
course.
also is always drifting around
Yeah.
the key, but he knows the song so well, and his guitar playing. Johnny Guitar Watson, I mentioned him before. He's very interesting, slightly off key. So I like if it's like defective, but
For
it has
sure.
to be
Bossa
interesting.
Bossa Nova, you know, and like the compositions like harmonically, you know.
So
like,
challenging. I
Yeah.
mean, as a kind of a folk music, it's the most kind of sophisticated
Oh, wow.
folk music
yeah,
I've ever heard. The Brazilian.
it's for sure. Yeah.
Were you into
Tom Jones,
Miles
you know.
Davis's hip hop crossover? Did you like that?
Yeah.
Okay, Miles Davis playing with like
Yeah.
hip hop and experiment.
His last album is not great,
I'm not
but
a
like
big fan, to be
it's
honest.
good
It's-
enough.
it's-
Any Miles
It's
album,
work.
It's not.
It's not, yeah.
Ah,
But it's
okay.
good. It's really good.
it's
I mean,
better
yeah.
than Johnny Guitar's last album.
Right.
That's called Doo-Bop or something. No, that's the last Miles Davis, and the Johnny Guitar Watson is funny. It's quite similar. We should look it up. The last
Sure.
one.
And
That's just painful, and like his home programming on the whatever drum machine, all sounds are horrible.
Johnny Guitar?
The last Miles Davis,
Ah,
at
last
least
Miles
sonically, it's kind of nice. He's working with this kid, and he's using an SP12 or whatever. It sounds legit. It's
Yeah.
not his best trumpet playing, and some of it is a bit cheesy, but it's okay. I can listen to it.
well, it's part of the
Bow Wow is the name of the
idea
Oh.
of him.
And like I'm the biggest fan. Like I was like at many gigs it was easy to see him, Johnny Guitar Watson, because he was typical for uni when they had like their semester party and not so much money. They would kind of book him
Alright.
for a venue that has like a 600 capacity, and he would play there with his band, and he was this old legend. And for me it was like the biggest to see him, and I was in the, I brought home his towel.
That's cool.
My girlfriend
You still
put it
keep
in the washing machine.
So you
And he died on stage, so he's one of my top
Oh,
heroes
man,
of all
that's
times.
crazy.
And like Miles Davis, he was making records definitely in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Maybe in the late 40s, but definitely in the 50s. He started when he was very young. He wasn't even a guitarist, he was a keyboardist. And like he was playing with some famous organ guy, maybe it was Jimmy Smith, and he said like, here, play the guitar. And so it was his second instrument, and he kind of reinvented himself. And this one period around A Real Mother for You, and 3 albums, like late 70s, I think there are.
I was looking at Bow Wow just now. That was released '94.
Yeah, that was his last one.
For
And
sure.
He died in
Yeah.
'96 maybe,
Yeah.
but like
Yes, '63.
the series between Ain't That a Bitch and
Yeah.
Giant is the last one of the really good ones.
Are these-
And on all these, he has one
the 70s.
Drummer Emery Thomas is one of my favorite drummers ever, and all other instruments except for the horns, saxophone, trombone, it's all Johnny Guitar Watson. He's playing the bass,
Wow.
the guitar, the Fender
Everything.
Rhodes, the synth. He's singing.
Damn.
He's the dude.
Wow.
And it's not Quincy Jones. He did it with simple gear, but still the sound he
It's
achieves
With
is
heart and balls.
Funky.
yeah, it's ridiculous. Too much reverb on the vocal in a way, but like then again, it couldn't be better.
It makes it-
and his
makes it-
sound on the guitar. He plays one note, you know, it's him. He's a big.
Nice. I'll have to listen to these.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any special love for a specific decade? Like, do you feel like, oh, I love like?
I love the
mo-
60s for the psychedelic, for
Okay.
the free love, and for the experimentation. And I still think, I said it before, no one will ever achieve what the Beatles have done for music.
No, especially nowadays.
In 8 years, between 62 and 1970, they did 13 albums, and they went from Twist and Shout to
I know.
I Am the Walrus. They told the history and the future of music and back, and any of their albums would be number one any day, and anything like Oasis is selling, but it's just lame compared to it. And yeah, so 60s, but 70s, Electric Miles, the good Quincy Jones stuff, probably the pinnacle of the audio engineering side of things, how instruments were recorded, how they were sounding.
Yeah.
The instruments that were introduced and like brought to the market, like the Prophet 5 and
All the synthesizers. and-
their impact and what they mean to music, how important they became. It's not only the 303 or the 909.
Early drum machines too.
Early drum machines
Yeah.
too, and so the 70s and then the 80s for the good hip hop and some interesting Talking Heads, Peter
Talking,
Gabriel, Adrian Belew.
Even The Cure, right? Or
The Cure, yeah, there's
Smiths.
good stuff, and in retrospective, a lot of stuff. But like on the audio side, when the CD came in, at the same time they were remastering all these albums, and for a while they were looking at frequency analyzers,
They were just
and they're
flat.
making it just flat, and this sounds horrible. And some of my favorite music, like the Zap, for instance, their later records, they suffer from this. Or Prince. The super straight line is
bad
just
mastering.
like sounds horrible.
Yeah.
So it's not the decade I really kind of connect to. And then it's the 90s already, and yes, I'm really big into like early Black Dog, Belittle, the Offspring, the side projects, Aphex Twin, Luke Vibert, Wagon Christ. I think it's gonna have a big resurgence, and if I look at my son and his friends and the scene of people, and they're now
How old is
22.
he? Your son?
How old?
Yeah.
22. And he's also producing and releasing music, and his biggest idol is Square Pusher and then
Nice.
Aphex Twin.
Yeah, it's good pushes.
But so he knows about these two, but he never really heard of Black Dog
Okay.
or Wagon Christ. So I played him some of that stuff. He gravitates to it, but like even before I did, I started playing him the stuff because I found their sound in his music, and I
Right.
was wondering why. I mean, he's my son. He must have heard it. It was around the house in a way, but
Exactly.
his
He's
mother wasn't
subconscious.
very supportive of any of this. What I was involved in. But I think so. The 90s are having a resurgence now, and I like that.
In that kind of sound specifically, or do you think?
Yeah, I think like especially like it was called IDM, intelligent
course, yeah.
dance music. It's a pretty
It's
lame.
kind of pretentious,
It's
but
a lame
Very
name, but
pretentious.
whatever. It just
IDM.
but I understand.
It's cool music.
I understand what they
and
were
I
going.
think it has a place.
That was a market term, right?
yeah,
That was something.
yeah, that-
it was-
no musician came up with
Exactly.
it.
And I'm pretty curious. You say that you have a 22-year-old kid. How do you manage to try to not influence or influence in his music tastes?
I didn't have much of a chance. The mother dictated the music in the car
Alright.
and at home in a way, and
So what does she listen to?
She listened to some cool stuff, and I think that is why he is so much into Square Pusher, because she was as well.
Okay.
And
cool.
she was more into the fall and punky stuff than I was, and she was also in a band, and she was a cool girl. But then I liked, and when we married, I think what I liked about her was that she never kind of gave me credit for what I did, and I didn't want someone to say, "Oh, you're the best."
Stroke your ego.
Yeah. But then in the end, it was too much. I mean, she just hated it all in a way, and that's how she influenced my son.
Right.
And I totally gave up on it, but like along the lines of stuff that she liked, there was some stuff that I liked as well, like Nirvana or whatever, and he really loved Nirvana, so that was big. Then he got into hip hop. Then he started trying in the car. He was maybe 10 years old, and he put on Earth to Infinity, and he said, "Mom, check this out, this is Dad. I think it's actually pretty cool." And I was like, what, he's only 10 years old? How does he know? And how does he even care about the track? So I was really moved by this. But he was seriously into gaming and everything else but making music. But when he was 17, he said like, "Dad, can I borrow an MPC?" And I said, "Sure, here you go."
He knew how to work with it?
No, but like he's smart with computers, and he doesn't like to be told.
He just learns.
And he learns by himself.
Yeah.
But whenever I did something, we had a phase when he was very little. He was playing the drums. I bought him a little kit. He was reacting. His mother was making the everyday. I kind of took a break to be home with him.
Nice.
She had a steady job, so I spent a lot of time with him. And whenever he was like uneasy, crying and wouldn't stop, I knew if I start like drumming the table, he'll stop and kind of follow me. And then we started doing this, and I got some videos I got to dig out when he was like really small and we're jamming together. But then he wanted to play at the orchestra in kindergarten, and they said to him, "No, it's only for the older kids, and you have to be able to read the score." And he came home, threw the sticks away, said, "Daddy, why did you never tell me about the score?" And I said, "Because I didn't think it was relevant. I told you about the one and the beat, but not the score." And he felt so betrayed that was it for music until when he was 17, asked for the MPC. So, but he had a rhythmic foundation and an interest in drumming, and then he started, and then pretty much. You should look up his album.
Okay, yeah, that would be cool if you could play like a music, like a bit. Yeah,
it's on YouTube. If you look for U-I.
Okay, just the letter.
Yes, and then full album. It looks like an emoji, but it's not. It's a wrong emoji. A second.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he did this when he was 19. When he was 17, I gave him the drum machine, and this is a sub-label of Church from London. It's actually a cool label.
Very cool. Oh, the Bluetooth is gonna...
And this one is all down-tempo, kind of trip-hop instrumental.
Okay.
Beautiful listening music, so not the Square Pusher stuff. And he's now releasing his second album. It has more kind of varied. It's not as easy listening. It's more compelling. And but he does like 3 tracks a day. It's crazy.
Sweet.
I mean, like,
that's cool.
And he approaches to you to some
collaboration,
some tips.
Yeah, sometimes like, what's that chord? And that's why I thought of like the old time about drumming. I showed him a pattern. He wasn't able to do it, but the next day he would sleep over it, and it works his brain, and the next day he could do it. So these chords, essentially, I showed him some of them.
Nice.
But he takes it, it's bad when it's joking. But
yeah, I'm sorry, man. This is not good. Listening experience here.
But it's a nice album.
Yeah, I get
and
the
like
idea.
One big moment was like a driver picks me up from Florianopolis to Curitiba in Brazil, and this is playing in the car. And
really?
I said like, what the fuck? And I just got this. I bought it, and I said, you know, it's my son. And like, no. And
what? That's insane, man. That's so crazy.
Brazil,
sounds like a really good tape. I mean, I love those chords and those chill beats, kind of vibes, NPC beats, you know.
And are you behind some new synthesizer or some new machine that you like wanna try to play with, or?
I really love the old stuff. That the recent stuff has a hard time to break the ice with me, and I appreciate what Behringer is doing, because those clones, there's always something to complain about, but like for the value, it gives you amazing stuff, and people have the opportunity to work with something that is really damn close to a MOOC or a Profit or whatever, and it's affordable, so I support it.
That's good.
And personally, I mean, you can make music probably on your phone. You could make a good album, and Daft Punk were claiming that they did the Tron soundtrack on the iPad.
Yeah, with the iPad,
Maybe it's true, maybe it's a publicity stunt. I know the Daft Punk guy, one of them is son of an old studio owner. He did the one football anthem, that was produced in his dad's studio, so he grew up in a recording studio. And it's hard for me to believe they really left all this behind to do it on an iPad. Whatever. But in theory it's possible, and it's fine. It's just like what you do with it matters. But personally, I had a period when I was poor, especially like using software cracks was like the thing for me to do as well. So I've had my time trying the virtual blah blah. I think now it's a lot better. When I did it, when I was poor, the early 2000s, the stuff was really like, it didn't really work even, you know. So I'm really frustrating. And to me, anytime when I play a real synthesizer, even if it's half broken, it has a soul to it, and it's like a real instrument, and I love them. And if you play a software, its behavior will be identical for everyone who owns it, and every time you press a key. But every 808, people say it all the time, but I know it for a fact now, every 808 sounds different. And they all go to the same direction, but one has a clap that's really short. Mine has one that goes. You can tweak them inside, so they really have character, and I love stuff with character. So for me, I rather work with a broken Farfisa than a new Korg, or Korg aren't so bad, but maybe Klavier. I love the Nord modular. That was an interesting.
That's amazing.
Interesting. I still use it, but anything they do now, I don't even know what they're called, but it's not.
The Nord leads, or there's a.
Or now the Jupiter XM.
Okay.
No.
It's too much.
So I like small companies like Black Corporation. Deckard Stream is very cool. It's very expensive, but it's very cool. This German guy who does MFB is like affordable gear before Behringer, and this one crazy dude, he makes it at home in Berlin. And cool. They're really hard to work, like the user interface is kind of hard, but like the sound of those machines, and Kraftwerk used it. I know he's legit, he's really cool. So even the new stuff, and it's like a modular world. It's all made of people who are from Czech Republic or France, and they're like underground, like the musicians, like same thing, and they have the great ideas, not Roland or Yamaha.
And they understand where you're coming from, right?
Yeah.
Like they understand.
Yeah, and they make something interesting, and like my biggest problem with Ableton Live, live. It's the greatest software, and I'm endorsing it, and I'm doing something for the event soon.
Yeah.
But the only problem I have with it, pretty much, is like that it is like Photoshop for graphics. Everybody's using it,
right?
And it can't be right to use the same as everyone else.
Yeah, it's better always to have experimenting with different.
Yeah, and so that's my only problem with it. But they do like incorporate the Max MSP, which would probably be dead otherwise by now. And I've done some Max MSP 20 years ago, and people are doing great stuff. So I like the platform. There's nothing about the software that is wrong. It's just like the popularity that is a problem for me. and maybe if I was them, I would deliver it without libraries, but then they wouldn't be what they are.
Yeah.
But the library is the beginning of the problem, you know. You kind of select a preset and
you start doing
and then you think you are a producer, but really you're not, you know.
You're just copying sounds.
Yeah, or like toolkits for samplers in the 90s. It was a full kind of drum track, a bass track, and if you play them all at the same time, it's a tune and it's copyright free.
Exactly.
And then you can kind of mess with it and you think you're a producer, but you're not.
It's tricky, right? Because I did that actually like 15 years ago or so. I made a few songs using that samples. Yeah. But I'm like, so I made a song, but then I really knew that I wasn't really making a song. I was just like
it was already there.
Mixing samplers and maybe changing the sheet. Yeah. But that's so cool.
And are you okay with producers that use samples in their tracks?
Totally, I'm okay with anything, and it's the result that matters. And I think even with the goddamn sample kit CD, you could come up with something mind-blowing.
Right.
And I just saw something on YouTube which was about like there was a couple of really, they were selling more than audio CDs. Those really successful. Ecstatic Goldmine was one of them, and there was a couple of like sampling CDs. They were standard of the industry in a way, and then they were showing like who was using them and what iconic tracks have been made with them.
With these sounds,
Yeah. So it's all good, but I think it's just making it hard for people if you give them too much pre-produced, or it misleads them in the illusion that they actually created something
original
that they didn't really even understand.
That is not that.
Yeah, it's like if I paint by numbers, you know. I'm not a painter, but if I paint by numbers, I can do something halfway decent.
Yeah.
Right.
But like if that would give me the illusion I could become a painter, it's so far off, you know, and I just don't know if it's fair.
I mean, it's interesting because at the end of the
To
day,
people, and they waste their time and they spend money and they buy another sample pack, and and it's never happening. And someone who's really good, he has a 4-track recorder and a broken guitar.
That's what I was gonna say. Hip hop, like sampling, is the base of hip hop, right?
It's most of it, actually.
And the limitation of the old stuff and the limitation of SP1200.
True.
And then following generations, and now you got gigabytes of samples. It must be wrong, you know.
It's too much.
It must be wrong. And talking about like how we produced in the 80s, it was still like the song was happening on the mixing desk, and then it was recorded probably on a cassette tape. And then if you progress, you had a reel-to-reel. I had one that made me like the big cat in the vlog. And then next was the digital audio tape, which was like a crippled thing, and they were always broken, and the tapes were always defective, but it gave you CD quality. And then the CD burner, and then it was all digital. But like in the early days, it was 2-track recording, so there was no overdubbing, no multi-tracking really. And I was editing with a razor blade, old school, and making mods on my table. This is a beat, so this is 2/4, so this is a 16th. I could chop up knowing like a grid, like just by measuring it, and then kind of juggle, experiment with it, make a tape loop. Reel to reel is a great thing. And so music, any take was like you couldn't recreate it. The next day, even if you didn't touch the studio, all the gear drifts, so the next day without touching it sounds different, it's out of tune, and it's gone. And it was painful because if you did the one take and one instrument was out of tune or way too loud, the whole thing was
Too bad.
screwed.
Yeah.
But whatever you did, it had the value of something that is special and it's unique.
It's
And now
ephemeral.
now you save version number 79,
Right.
and then
Mix
number 80,
500.
and oh fuck, there's no end to it, and you can have another plug-in, another EQ, another track.
Do you want one or you're fine? You have one?
Yes, sure. I have one. So I think it makes it harder. The limitation made it easier to come up with something cool.
Right.
Records were sounding cool in the 80s because there were only cool synths. In the 90s, when the uncool synths started happening, music doesn't sound cool
As good.
necessarily.
Right,
Sometimes
right.
it's a good song, but it suffers from really obvious bad sounds. But like the early synth stuff, it always sounds cool because there was only cool gear.
Warm and
And
punchy.
It's hardly possible to
Yeah.
make a bad sound with a Juno synth or any Roland. They always sound good.
Right.
Yeah. Would you advocate then the use of these vintage synths? Vintage
I
drum
do.
machines,
For me,
all the methods that
they are my companions.
those are your,
Like
yeah.
nothing like a 606. I use it all the time.
Do you have a favorite
And I
one?
just learned for the 10th time how to program a 303 because that you
It's
keep
so hard.
forgetting. It's so hard, and and all buttons double or triple trigger, so it's really confusing. But I mastered this again,
Nice.
and the workflow is better with some of the modern machines. But I just love them. They're
Of
my
course.
companions.
Do you have any favorite?
So many. But like the 606, if I was stranded on an island, it would be nice to have a 606, a 101, and a JX3P. With these three, I can always make a track.
Yeah.
And then maybe one effect or maybe an MS-20, but build on this because the 606 has two trigger outs. One goes to the sequencer and the 101, the other one goes to the JX3P. That's the core setup I have with reagents as well, the trio. And that I can work, the lights can go out on stage. I know the 101, I know the JX, I know the programmer. I don't have to look at it. I'm turning blind anyhow, so I better hold on to this kind of stuff. I don't have to read a display. I love Deckard Stream, but the display is a joke. I go there with magnification glasses. And it's just like,
And are you planning to put a live show soon, or like collaboration in a live?
still active with Magic Mountain High. We're actually playing as Magic Mountain High for Ableton, and I think they're cool. They book us. We don't even use it on stage.
You just use hardware,
We
right?
use hardware only, and they booked us for their event. So hats off. Ableton,
That's cool.
Hats off. That's super cool.
Shout out to them.
Yeah.
What about guitars? Do you own guitars?
I own guitars, I still play them, I love them, and you can build the same affinity as with a synthesizer.
Right.
They're more female even. I mean, the curves are naturally almost like hips and a waistline or whatever. It's beautiful, or boobs. It's a beautiful, and the way you produce a note is even more real than a piano. You actually string the strike the string and you vibrate, and if you don't press it, so it's a bit more of a challenge. I love it, but and you can spend a fortune on guitars as you can on synth. But for me, I dream about synthesizers, not about guitars.
But do you own guitars?
I own guitars.
What do you
and I
own?
love
Like Fenders, Gibsons?
Yes, but like it's not like the synthesizers. I don't collect
You don't
them,
care
and like
about
I
that?
had like a couple of Telecasters, an original Fender, and a cheap Squire. I kept the Squire because I think it's the better guitar.
Yeah,
but it was way
at the end of the
cheaper,
day,
and I judged them.
Which way is better?
I don't know. I think it was from the very early series made in Japan, and they wanted to show how well they can make it.
Yeah,
so
Japanese
like a lot
guitars.
of like the carving was done a lot more. Like it was really nicely built. Oh, it is. I still have
for
it.
sure.
And it just like was a better guitar than the US standard Telecaster. That's not for all the generations, but they say about the early Tokai. There's another Japanese brand who copied. They say the early copies of the Gibson,
Gibsons.
the
Those are
Tokai,
really
they're
good.
really expensive now, and they're good guitars. So.
Yeah, even Yamahas, like all Yamahas made in Japan are amazing. ¿Cómo vamos de tiempo?
Yeah, but it's not a religion for me. So my number one go-to guitar is an old Yamaha nylon string.
Nice.
And with all the bossa nova, and it's not so painful, and the wide fretboard gives you it's easy to play.
Yeah.
And then next would be probably the tele, or I got a hollow body jazz guitar, but that again it's another Squire. So I'm not spending money on guitars.
But you still
I bought a beautiful Gibson ES-135. It's a very old model in Austin.
Oh wow!
I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
It was $80, and it was
Hello.
It had no
body.
cutaway, but a pickup,
Okay.
a single coil built in, and maybe a PO90 if that's the name of it.
P90.
And it had a big crack in the side, so it was broken already. But I took it. It was so cheap and it was so old. And then I took it to some guitar whatever shop in LA, which is top of the notch. But like so often they're like doctors, you know. He sees this guitar, he has to fix it.
Right.
He realizes I have no money, so he fixed it really nicely for another $100. So I had a really nice guitar.
That's awesome.
That was the only one. But when I was really poor, I had to sell it. And yeah, so it hurts. I don't collect guitars, but I'm really kind of bad case with the synthesizers.
That's awesome.
I could.
Well, there's I just wanna name a few people that joined into the
show
transmission. Yeah, it's Benjamin Joel sending love to David from the UK community.
Yeah. Big ups, Benjamin.
Yeah, and Jorge Castro.
Oh,
Jorge, yeah.
Our friend.
Shout out to Jorge.
it's not Jorge from Lisbon, no.
No, it's
Jorge from.
it's one of our friends.
Jorgito.
From Birth Portal, the record label, and Mejia also said,
That must have been super boring. Whatever.
No, actually,
You had
no,
other
no,
options. You didn't have to.
Most of the people stay the whole conversation.
Sí,
So
thank you guys.
It's great. Thank
We
you.
love you.
Gracias a todos por estar aquí.
sintonizar.
Rey Arad.
I want to sing it, but I don't want my mom to see it. So.
Yeah.
Can I leave?
Yeah,
of course.
Of course.
¿Cuánto tiempo fue?
Todavía no acaban, todavía no la
Bueno.
Oh, wait, is it half two?
It's like,
Gracias a todos por
¿cuánto tiempo llevamos?
sintonizar.
1 hora 40.
¿Una 40? Ok,
Los
cool.
queremos.
Le damos unos 20 minutillos más y ya.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's still on.
Bye.
Thanks for everything.
Bye. We love you. Just go.
Thanks for coming, man. No, pues ahí lo terminamos entonces.
Sí.
Oh, there. It's funny, the 10-second delay.
Yeah.